Happy Saturday, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well today. I'm excited for my talk with Jordan. He's going to be coming on here and joining soon. And again, if you guys have any questions, definitely post those below. Jordan is an amazing musician and an administrator and a professor. So he has a lot of really cool projects going on, and I'm sure he'd love to answer your questions. Jordan, hello!
Hey, Larissa, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Oh, can't complain.
Yeah? It's so
Yeah,
beautiful
no,
today.
it is. Yeah, I mean, I looked at my at the weather app and I was like, oh man, 66 degrees. That is living in luxury for Michigan.
Yes. Yes, super nice. So thank you so much for joining today. I'm excited about our talk.
My pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll introduce what I'm doing for anyone who's joining and doesn't know. So I am having little interviews with people who work in the fine arts industries just to learn from them and to keep the conversation going about the importance of the arts. And Jordan is an amazing musician. He and I met one evening at Hope College backstage at your performance.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's
then
right.
we connected, and you asked me to play on one of your albums, Charlie Parker with Strings,
Mhm.
which was such a fun project. I am so happy that I was able to participate in that with you. That was really fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And so why don't we start off with just, can you introduce yourself and your career path?
Sure. Hi, I am Jordan VanHemert, and I am currently a professor at Hope College. Let's see. I grew up playing saxophone and went into college thinking that music ed was my path. And to a degree, it still kind of is. So I am a graduate of Central Michigan University, where I received a Bachelor of Music Education degree. And then I went on to get my master's at the University of Michigan in improvisation. And then I got a degree in jazz performance from the University of Illinois with a kind of a cognate or a minor in music ed as well. So then let's see, what did I do? So I'm actually from West Michigan and found myself living in West Michigan after I graduated with my DMA, and it started a nonprofit organization focused on jazz advocacy, performance, and education. And shortly thereafter, I got the job at Hope College, and here I am, 1 year later, hopefully 1 year better or wiser, stuck in quarantine in my apartment. So there you go.
Yes. And we're both on the board of the Chamber Music Festival of
Right.
Saugatuck,
Yeah, that's right.
which
Chamber
is
Music
fun
Festival of
too.
Saugatuck. It's weird because I still don't necessarily feel like I'm like officially on the board because I
Yeah.
the pandemic came around right as we were about to enter my first season as a board member.
Yeah.
So
And the season was canceled,
exactly. Yeah. So
unfortunately.
yeah,
But
major bummer.
I'm still excited you're on the board, and I think you're going to
Me
add
too.
so much and just new ideas and wealth of knowledge. So it'll be exciting. But um so back to your career path. You've done a lot, and I think it's super impressive. But also, I don't really have a background in jazz. So
Mhm,
I'm more classically trained.
mhm.
And I guess one of my questions for you is, can you explain to like a lay person jazz and improvisation and some of the framework that you use to create improvisatory works?
Yeah, sure. Ironically, that's kind of one of the things that I teach at Hope. I teach Survey of Jazz, which is MUS 105, and that's mainly non-majors. So I am constantly trying to find new ways to explain what I do to people who aren't necessarily familiar with it. So in terms of in jazz, it is a mostly improvisatory art form. We do have compositions that are written out and standard repertoire that we pull from. But when you look at percentage-wise, at least, the bulk of a jazz performance, it's mostly improvisation, which I think is really cool. In jazz, we speak a common language, which is based on the African-American oral tradition. So to take it way back, the mid-Atlantic slave trade resulted in kind of a cultural transplantation of people who spoke all of these different languages and had all of these different cultures and different musical and dance cultures into the United States and into one common place. And when the first Africans on American soil were very tragically and horribly enslaved, they communicated in a lot of ways through that common tongue of music. And so you saw slaves who wrote, or well, rather sang work songs and spirituals and all of these ways that they coped and fought through the brutality that was around them. So what emerged from that was a universal language called the blues. And the blues kind of gave birth to jazz as we know it. And so really if in classical music you have a lot of, something that jazz and classical music have in common is our common time signature, 4/4 time. So in classical music, a lot of the time you hear an accent on beats 1 and 3. And like if you're listening to classical music, like the beat 1, the downbeat is absolutely what everybody's aiming for. And I think like when you're playing in an orchestra, which I've done a few times, you are always looking for that conductor's beat 1. Especially like if they're doing, I'm sure you've played under all sorts of conductors, Larissa, where beats 2, 3, and 4 may or may not be something that you're clinging to for dear life, but mm-hmm. Beat 1 is always super clear, and that's part of the beat structure of Western art music. Well, in jazz, the beat structure is actually flipped because jazz is based on syncopation. So mm-hmm. In jazz, we see a common beat structure of beats 2 and 4. And actually, in a lot of popular music, you see that as well. And that's because much of this popular music, as well as jazz, shares the common heritage of the blues. So anytime you hear, popular music in this country, mostly, some like modern music is maybe not so much, but especially like when you hear early rock and roll and you hear hip hop, R&B, all of those are coming from the same place, and that's that common heritage of the blues. So where we go from there is that jazz is this improvised style of music, and basically modern jazz kind of has this song form, right? Where you have some sort of base material, maybe it's a jazz standard, and you are playing and communicating using that song form. And then after that, musicians improvise and take turns improvising, and they base their improvisations on that core harmonic and melodic structure. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like a quick, probably not so quick, slightly long walk for a short drink of water explanation of kind of what jazz is. Yeah.
But I think jazz is so much more complex than most people realize.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you have to, and maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me I'm wrong. But I feel like when you're talking about that skeleton structure of the melodic, harmonic, bass that people are improvising on, you still are like within an ensemble, you're passing that around and you're communicating, aren't you? But you're doing it within that key and that framework. So there's more of a rule than maybe I would have thought before. Is that sort of the right thinking?
Yeah, I mean, to a lot of people and to a lot of my non-majors, jazz, especially when they don't know what to listen for, sounds like chaos. So
Yeah.
most jazz courses go chronologically because the music is a music of ancestry and it builds on itself. So starting in New Orleans, where you have a lot of music that was written for marching bands, and I keep saying written, but it really wasn't written down; it was passed down oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
That for a lot of people sounds very chaotic, especially when you have people improvising at the same time, and they can't really, and they being my students, can't really pick out like a really clear melody. It sounds fun, but it's like chaos. So picking out a structure, I agree with you. Yeah, there's a lot more structure than a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
But it is definitely something that you just have to learn how to listen to it.
Yeah.
And in my class, that's the main goal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect my students to be these amazing scholars and who know everything about the music. That's kind of my job as a professor. But what I do want is to expose them to this style of music and to help them learn how to listen to it.
Yeah. So, and there's so many different types of jazz. So the project I worked with you on, how would you categorize that? The Charlie Parker?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Charlie Parker spearheaded the bebop movement.
Okay.
And so I would very much classify that project under the bebop movement.
Uh-huh.
But it was this really interesting classical jazz fusion. And I don't know if you know this, but Charlie Parker actually was petrified of that project.
Really?
It made him super nervous to play with orchestral string players. Super nervous. To the point where he actually was like scared to go into the studio. But today, one of the songs that we actually ended up playing is one of his favorite things ever that he recorded. He said that in an interview. So I would partially call this like a jazz classical fusion, but it's within the realm of bebop.
Okay. Yeah, because I loved that music. That was just, it was so much fun, and it was just beautiful, and yeah, love
Yeah,
that
I agree.
project with you.
It's a great piece.
Yeah. Okay, my next question for you was about your doctoral thesis and what that was. Can you explain that?
Sure. So my doctoral thesis was basically, it was a saxophone, like a classical saxophone curriculum, because one of my passions is teaching applied saxophone. And I'm always trying to think of new and creative ways of doing the same repertoire, or teaching the same repertoire that can reach a greater population of students. So I had this idea. I love teaching saxophone. How can we do it differently? So it's a curriculum or a partial curriculum of applied saxophone pedagogical material that is based on what I've learned from studying jazz.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Have you tested that curriculum in a school setting ever yet? Or
yeah, so when I did my DMA at the University of Illinois, I tested it with Deborah Rickmeyer's studio, of which I was also a part. So I asked for volunteers from Professor Rickmeyer's studio, and I tested it that way and did like I believe it was like a 4-week mini course in classical saxophone. And then I've also been testing it with my students at Hope during my first year there.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, that has been really fun. Um, because of the material that I used for my project and the pieces that I chose to use as examples, they actually knew a lot of those pieces, and they were working on them. So I
Mm-hmm.
just thought, why not?
Yeah.
And of course, there's that, the technical foundation of scales and ear training that
Mm-hmm.
is also fundamental and very easy to incorporate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. How many students do you have in your studio?
So, because of the way that lessons at Hope work, with non-majors, they can get an FA1 credit, right? The Fine Arts 1
Mm-hmm.
or 2. Is it 2? I don't know.
I
Either way,
don't
they can get one
remember.
of their Fine Arts credits um,
Yeah.
by taking lessons. So uh, um, so during my first semester, I had 8 students, which was great. A lot of them were non-majors, though, and so there was some attrition. But I have 5 majors,
Mm-hmm.
um, who are a combination of music ed and saxophone performance and jazz studies,
Mm-hmm.
that I really enjoy working with. So yeah, about
Yeah.
5, which is not a bad size for a liberal arts college.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, you're running a nonprofit and teaching all of these other classes and doing your own gigs. So, and many other things I probably don't even know about. Can you talk a little bit about um, your nonprofit?
Sure, yeah. I founded the Holland Concert Jazz Orchestra partially as a result of demand. There were some, friends and colleagues that I'd had who really wanted that outlet and didn't really have it. There wasn't a band on the lakeshore that was going for the same things that we were. And so I was thinking about what, in terms of marketing, that, like what's a need of the community, or what is something that the community needs but doesn't think it needs or doesn't know it needs. um, and something that I had kind of been missing is I had been doing freelance gigs with a lot of the large jazz ensembles in the area,
Mm-hmm.
but um, with the exception of probably the Grand Rapids Jazz Orchestra, there are a lot of the groups are either there are reading bands, which are great. They read gigs and play really well. And there are some other bands that are working bands, and maybe they have a gig like GRJO at the first Sunday of the month at Founders. But I didn't want to pattern HCJO after any of those. I actually wanted to fulfill the need of I wanted to give a smaller amount of concerts. I wanted to pay everybody and try to pay
Mm-hmm.
everybody really well, or at least what I deemed to be paying well for having to pay 18 or 19 musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then lastly, I wanted to perform a lot of music that I had really come to appreciate, but that was on the more difficult side. So music by Maria Schneider and Thad Jones that takes a decent amount of rehearsal to pull together. But I also had this interest in education, and I wanted to create a group that could perform in educational settings as well. And in general, the other thing that I wanted to kind of bring in is this idea of jazz advocacy, which through which rather we're trying to raise awareness and promote the art form. So I
Mm-hmm.
had these 3 kind of goals, and talked to a friend and former student of mine who I met in Clarkston when I was over there teaching weekly as a freelancer during my MM. And I asked him if he wanted to be a part of this because he ended up going to school at Grand Valley, and he did this really cool degree in business. And I thought, that is something I don't know anything about. And so we worked together, and I ran, the music end of it and the artistic end. And he ran a little bit more of the business side of it. And that's how the organization came to be. And here we are, like 2 years later, and we're still a young organization, but we have never gone in the red, knock on whatever. And we just won our first grant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, through the Michigan Council of Arts and Cultural Affairs.
Yeah.
And we have a great collaboration with the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan, through which we perform assemblies for students with their Be Nice action plan for mental health. So if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I had thought that this is where we'd be, I probably would have said, no, I don't know if this thing is going to be around in a year, but
yeah,
I sure am glad that we are.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of what we have done for the community.
That's really exciting. And I mean, with the current state of affairs for the world, I bet things are a little, weird with planning, but are you guys planning some concerts for the upcoming year, possibly?
Yeah, you're absolutely right when we say that things are weird right now. I think that's an understatement, but I think right now we're doing what I think a lot of the other arts organizations in our area are doing, and we're keeping an eye on the numbers and keeping an eye on projections and taking our best guess.
Yep. Yeah.
So we're continuing to plan for the future. But we're also doing things that we can do right now, because the organization was founded upon the principle of doing good for the community. And obviously we want to get out there and play concerts. But one way that we've actually been trying to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic is we had the grant-funded project, our Soloist Festival, our annual Soloist Festival. This is our second annual festival, and we were going to hold it in March, but it was scheduled for late March, and we were all in shutdown at that point. So something that we've done is we've actually moved all of it online. We're going to make a big announcement about it on Monday, but I suppose you heard it here first. And we're trying to give all these students who had things that they were looking forward to about their academic year, like Youth Arts Festival and MSBOA festivals, and all these things that they were working hard for. And I'm not saying that we're going to replace any of those things, but we are certainly trying to still do what we can to keep the students playing and give them a goal. I think
that's great.
a lot of times I'm very goal oriented. So if I don't have performances or things coming up, I very quickly need to try to create my own opportunities or my own things, my own goals. Otherwise, I find myself losing motivation. So if we can give the students maybe something that they could be excited about or something to motivate them, I'm all for it. So that's kind of one of the things that we're doing in the immediacy.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks.
I had 2 more questions.
Sure.
The first is, can you describe your love for jazz?
Sure.
And when, more specifically, I guess, when is the first memory you had of like being just in awe of jazz music and knowing that's what you were interested in pursuing?
Sure. So my love for jazz goes way back to when I was in elementary school. And I think it was right around the time that my grandfather died, and we inherited a lot of his CDs. He had a very large CD collection. And what had happened is I liked to listen to music at that point. So I just started going through the CDs and just listening and seeing what was out there, and what he had been into. And one CD that I found just stopped me completely in my tracks. It was The Essential Charlie Parker. And I listened to that CD over and over and over and over again. And it just completely floored me. And I thought I wanted to do that. I was a few years off from, choosing an instrument to play, or even being in that part of my life. But I knew that I wanted to do that. Whatever, and I didn't really think about like whatever capacity it would be, but I wanted to play like that. I heard his recording of Stella by Starlight first, really popular jazz standard, and it completely blew me away. The sound. It was really the sound of the instrument. I'd never heard anybody play the saxophone like that. And I fell in love with it. I became very quickly obsessed. And when I did get my first saxophone, I went back to that record and I tried to play along with with him, and I didn't get terribly far, because a lot of what he plays is far more virtuosic than what you are able to do when you're just learning the instrument. But I have very fond memories of just sitting in front of my stereo and just trying to play along with those records, and that's how it started for me. And I still listen to the music, and I know a lot more about it now, but also there's still so much of it that is mystifying to me, and so much of it that blows me away. I still get excited about the music, and I can still listen to records and just be blown away. And I think that love and passion for the music is something that has kind of sustained me, because things aren't always really easy for us as we're going through our careers, and as you very well know. And every time things have been difficult for me, I just go back and remind myself why I do this, and why, and what made me fall in love with this music in the first place, and what makes all of those difficulties in this pursuit worth it.
Yeah. The next question was, do you have a favorite project that you've worked on?
Sure. Yeah. I think that I've done a lot of fun things lately, and I've worked on a lot of projects, but I think my favorite would have to be this concert that I planned at Hope in the fall. It's called Toward Convergence.
And I think I saw some articles about that. It looked very cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it was the collaboration between 4 first-year faculty members, and we were all new in art, dance, theater, and music. And so something that we thought that we could do is, we were just hanging out at lunch one day and decided that it would be really cool to see if we could make something where our arts would be in the same space, not just tolerating each other, but that we would be able to have our music and hanging installation of this cheesecloth, and art depicted on cheesecloths. It was this forest kind of a thing. I'm describing it really poorly. My art colleague would just hate that. Anyway, and we had one of our dance colleagues was improvising dance. I had my students and I were performing, and one of our theater colleagues had designed the lighting. Wow. And it was a really special evening to me, and a collaboration that was, I think, symbolic of our friendship that we had developed over those first short weeks of the semester. But it was also, I think, to show our students that a lot of times we get really siloed. And I think, honestly, Larissa, you're really good at fighting this, but I think we get really, really siloed in whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
And this project was so special to me because it was a really deliberate attempt to get out there and reach beyond the confines of our specific disciplines. So that probably awesome. Is my favorite project.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I think when it's hard as artists with different forms that we work with, music, dance, visual, theatrical, because it takes so much discipline in one specific area. It is easy to just solely focus on that, but I think it's so powerful and shows, you know, community and unity when you're able to collaborate and work past differences of opinion and just the struggles of working in different art forms and bringing them together in the first place. It's just difficult, I think. Yeah. And when you're able to come together, it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw something similar that you did with your mosaic scholars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was really cool to see also. So I think honestly that we, as a community of artists, are kind of trending in that way.
Yeah.
But I'm just extremely heartened whenever I see things like that pop up, because it really does speak to the great community of artists that we have here in West Michigan.
Yeah, yeah. So this has been really awesome. Do you have time to take the 2 questions that we got submitted?
You bet.
Yeah? Okay, so these are from my mother, the president of the Chamber Music Festival of Saugatuck. So the first question that she asked you was, because you and I assume your wife, Elise, live in an apartment, were you able to figure out a good home studio space with temporary sound panels?
Yeah, that was something that I really struggled with at the beginning of the quarantine. And what I play in right now is, it's a drum shield, or an isolation booth, as it's sometimes called. They go by the same names, and it's basically like the front is like this plexiglass or plastic kind of a panel, a couple panels, and it's like hexagonal, and there are soft absorbent panels as well that make up the back and the sides of it. And I play in that. It has a roof. Again, it's completely isolated.
Wow.
And that has been really helpful. And I have found that solution. I'm borrowing it from a church.
Oh, okay.
And
very nice.
But it was a great discovery, being in that apartment. Because it has allowed me to maintain a little bit of normalcy in my schedule of playing and teaching and composing and
yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a little different for the violin. I have a nice mute that I can just put on, and it's not as loud, and I don't need a whole sound shield.
yeah. Well, and like saxophone is kind of an aggressive instrument. Like it if there's a saxophone in the room, like, you will hear it.
Yeah.
And whereas violin, a lot of people, I feel like, are they're a little, maybe take to it a little bit kinder. People seem to take kinder to string instruments, like,
the timbre of the instrument and just the volume projection it gets is definitely not the same as the saxophone. So yeah. That's awesome that you constructed that for yourself, though. That's great.
Yeah.
So then the last question we have is, how do you manage your Zoom or video meeting times? I guess she's asking between you and your wife.
Oh, yeah, sure. So actually we don't. That's the short answer. We are often on simultaneous Zoom calls, and Zoom has this really vexing feature for musicians, but it's cool when you're not a musician and don't need to use that aspect of it. So if you're doing a regular meeting, where it automatically suppresses background noise. And
Oh,
so,
I didn't know this.
yeah, so
Huh.
Zoom automatically suppresses background noise, which makes it super annoying for musicians, because my students will be playing and it will think that that sound is background noise, and start suppressing the saxophone, and you need to turn off the feature and whatever. Anyway.
Oh, this is
um,
a good tip because I've been teaching lessons on Zoom and the sound
oh,
it takes a while for the violin to come through. It'll like, the student will be playing and then it's like silent and then there's
oh,
a delay and it's like it finally picks up the sound. So maybe I should work on that feature.
yeah, yeah. It's under the audio settings, in the preferences menu or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, so because of that, it makes it so that we're able to, despite the basically consuming tons of bandwidth, it makes it so that we're able to have simultaneous Zoom meetings, and we often do.
Wow. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little laggy, and the like the internet connection is not always the most stable thing. But again, it's all about, coping. I can't wait to be back in my office and until I'm able to like meet with my colleagues in person. But for the time being, yeah, our no solution is working out about as well as one could expect it to.
Yeah. There you go. Well, Jordan, this has been such a good talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much for having me, Larissa. And thank
Yeah.
you, Lynette, for your questions. That's really fantastic. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've really enjoyed this. So thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And if people are interested in looking up your music for you personally or the jazz orchestra, is there details or like websites that they should go to?
Sure. Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at jvanhemusic. I have a website that I should really get around to updating, jordanvanhemert.com. And the website for the jazz orchestra is hollandcjo.org. And the Instagram page for and also Facebook for the jazz orchestra is at official HCJO. We're going to be posting some information very soon about our virtual soloist festival. So if there are any musicians out there who might be interested in that, we are going to be launching that very soon. So thanks again, Larissa. I really appreciate
very exciting
time. And yeah, thanks so much. Really looking forward to the opportunity to play together again.
Yes, I would love that when the world is back to normal, hopefully soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, Larissa.
Have a great day.
You also. See you.
Bye.